Hello. So now that we're done with most of the material, all we have to do is add some lights. So since we still did not add our lights, I'm just gonna go ahead and hide this because we need to work with our renders. Now we need to set our renders to a draft first because we don't want to spend too much time when we are just previewing how a material looks like or how the space looks like in preparation for the final render. Now because I'm still drafting, I don't want to wait that long and I don't want such a large file and I don't want big quality images or high quality images. So I need to work with a draft version. So to do that, I'm going to go to tools and I'm going to go to options. I'm going to locate the render properties from the document properties under render. So once I press on render, I should come up with these properties. Now, sometimes you have the Rhino renderer and sometimes you have another renderer called Rhino Legacy Renderer. If you have the Legacy Renderer, please choose that. That will make things much easier. Right now, all I have is Rhino Renderer, so I'm just gonna choose it because I don't have another choice. I'm gonna make sure that the dimensions of the image are not high. So I don't wanna go for the largest image because a large image requires high quality render and I don't want to do that at a draft level. If I were rendering a final product or a final image to be placed into a presentation or to be shown to a client, then I'm gonna choose the largest quality possible. But that's gonna take a lot of time in the render part. Sometimes it takes up to hours and sometimes a few days. So please make sure that you choose the right the resolution and the dimensions for the right purpose of the render. Right now, since I'm going for a draft, I'm choosing the smallest render possible. So that's 514 by 325. Alternatively, of course, you can always go to a slightly larger image of 640 by 480. That's up to you. I'm just going to go ahead and choose this one simply because we've been choosing the small one all along and just to see the difference in the render. If you don't want to do that, always feel free to go for the smaller part. Now the DPI is the resolution of the image. That's another thing that I will have to change if I were working with a final render. Right now this is a draft, so I'm just going to keep it at 72. It can go up to 300 if I wanted a really, really high quality image. 150 would be fine for a small or a relatively small image that will be presented on an A2 document, maybe as part of an A2 document. So maybe an A4 size will be sufficient for 150. Sometimes an A3 size also will be sufficient for 150. So you always need to keep a few more hours before your deadline or before your submission, so you can try a few of the renders, print them out, because this might take a lot of your time actually. So I'm going to keep this at 72 right now because I'm still drafting. And the quality is, of course, draft quality. And that is another thing that I have to change if I were working with a final quality. So because this is draft, I'll keep it as draft. And if this was a final quality, then I'll choose final quality. Right now, I'm keeping it as a draft quality. I'm going to scroll down just so we can have a look at what we can change or what we can edit with Rhino. And bear in mind that we're not adding any plugins. We're not using V-Ray. We're not using Grasshopper. We're not using any of the rendering software. This is purely the Rhino renderer. So I'm going to skip to the bottom part where it says ground plane. Now there's a really nice thing that Rhino can give you is whenever you have an exterior shot or something that is, it seems like it's flying in the environment and you needed to add a ground plane to it, you can always tick that and then click on ground plane settings and change these settings and change the image as you want. So you can add material, you can add it as a shadow only, you can use a material. So say I want it to be in a grass area. So I can always add material just like I would add any other material right here from my list and choose, say, could be aluminum. Well, obviously it's not aluminum. So I'm going to choose something that is a little bit, maybe grass. I'm just going to click on the arrow right here and add a material from the material library and try to look for whatever material that makes me happy. So I'm going to go for organic, maybe shrubs and bushes, or maybe grass, flowers, whatever you want. I'll just try flowers. I've never tried that. And we'll go for maybe red tulips. And then I'm going to click on OK. And I'm just doing that just to show you the difference. You can always turn it back off if you want by unticking ground plane. I'm gonna scroll down to lighting. We can always add the sun. And here is a very nice trick. You can always choose the location. So if you go to sun settings, you will end up with this. You can either manually control your sun, or you can automatically control it when you add your location. So right now I am in Abu Dhabi. Well, it's obviously in Ghana, so I'm going to move this to Abu Dhabi. And I'm going to click on here, just so it automatically locates my location. And then I'm going to choose the time as now. It's currently nighttime, and therefore you can see that it has changed to a nighttime. So that's 23rd of April 2022, 12:22 a.m. and that's exactly the time right now. I can't believe I'm working that late. Anyway, so I'm going to change this just so we can see the difference to, say, maybe 12:22 p.m. instead. So it's no longer now. Okay. So you can see that it will be sunny, and once I'm happy with my outcome, please feel free to play around with it and see what options you can change and how those are going to affect your render. So that requires some time. So you can, okay, now I'm going to click on OK. I'm sorry, I'm getting distracted, but because my computer is lagging, let me try to resize it. Maybe it will make things, I closed it. Let's go back again. And keep this at Abu Dhabi. And then I move back and make it now, but move the AM to PM. And I'm gonna try to resize it this time from this side so I don't close it again. Okay, so now I'm just gonna click on OK. And my settings must have changed. Now, when you look at the skylight, you can see that the intensity is 1. You can always also edit how much skylight. And by skylight, we're talking about indirect sunlight that is coming from the sky. And that has to do with probably the weather conditions and how clear the sky is and all that. So you can also change that manually. The default is 1. Feel free to change that. Let's make it 0.1 or maybe 10 and see the difference. So 10 might be a bit too bright, maybe 2, and try to look at the difference. Please go ahead and play around with whatever settings you find tempting to play around with. You can always reset everything, or maybe you can take a screenshot of the original settings so that you make sure that you are able to bring everything back if you get lost or you get stuck. Right now, again, I'm struggling with pressing on the OK button for some reason. I'm just going to rescale this. And oops, sorry, that's my Dropbox. I think I'll just close this, even though I don't think it will save the settings unless I press on OK, but because I can't see properly, I'll just close this now. And then we can start rendering. Once you change these render settings and you press on this globe, you will see that things change and these settings should have taken effect into your image. So you can see right now, oh yeah, they did take effect, which is great. So you can see that the open door is allowing more light in. So if I'm going to close the door, it will allow less light. And if I put my ceiling back on, the scene will be very dark probably, because I don't have any interior lights inside. You can see that my materials being rendered. It's taking a little bit of time, but a good render requires, or a good work requires some time. So please be patient. Make sure that you choose the correct settings so you reduce the amount of waiting time, and always make sure that you are patient and you have enough time to keep on trying things. In the next tutorial, we're going to talk about lights and how we can add lights, followed by how we can edit our final render settings. We just slightly touched upon them now, but we will go through them step by step so you can end up with a better preview. I would like to note that even the tutorial is not going to give you default settings. There's no right and wrong in the render settings. That depends on your scene, that depends on your computer, on what you want to show in your image and on your space. So we're just play around with the render settings please feel free to experiment and play around with things so you can understand what every setting does. Just a little note before we end this tutorial, you can see on the outside I have a few, and this is the land or the floor that we added from Rhino. That might be more visible if I go back to my 1 point perspective. Again, I'm going to go to my perspective view and I'm going to zoom out, and you can see that the floor is now endless. It's all over around surrounding my object. A few of you might face problems of having the floor interacting with the floor that we added from the environment. To avoid that, I'm just going to press on the interior floor plane that I added before, go to the properties of the plane and move over to thickness. Now the thickness is now off. I can always add it on and make it say 10 or 0.5 just to give it a thickness so that it's slightly thicker than the floor on the surrounding floor, so they're not overlapping and they're not canceling each other out. If you're not facing that problem like I am, you can always turn it off and enjoy your scene. So happy rendering, and please keep on experimenting. Keep watching for the next tutorial to add lights and cutting planes and extracting 2D plans and sections.